two words, one mirror, and a name that has echoed through centuries of fear. Because sometimes when people say her name in the dark, the reflection looking back isn't their own. Most people believe Bloody Mary is just a harmless children's game, a ritual performed at sleepovers to scare friends and test courage. But behind that simple story lies a darker history, one rooted in real people, violent events, and strange reports that have followed mirrors for hundreds of years. In this video, we are going to explore the true story behind Bloody Mary, from the life of a queen who earned the name in blood, to the mirror rituals that appeared across different cultures, and the unsettling reason this legend has never truly disappeared. It always begins the same way. A person stands alone in a dark bathroom. The door is closed, the lights are off. A mirror waits in front of them, sometimes lit by a candle, sometimes only by the faint glow of the room. They take a breath and say her name once. Nothing happens. They say it again, still nothing. But by the third time, something changes, not in the room, but in the feeling. The silence grows heavier. The reflection seems slightly off, as if it is a fraction of a second behind. The darkness behind them looks deeper than the actual room, and an uncomfortable thought begins to form. What if the mirror isn't empty at all? For hundreds of years, people have repeated this ritual, not because they expect nothing to happen, but because sometimes something does. And the name they whisper is always the same: Bloody Mary. Long before she became a legend, Bloody Mary was a real person. Her name was Mary Tudor, and she was born in 1516, the daughter of King Henry VIII of England. As a child, she lived a life of royal privilege and was considered the legitimate heir to the throne. But her world changed suddenly and brutally when her father decided to leave her mother, Catherine of Aragon, in order to marry another woman. To do this, he broke away from the Catholic Church and created the Church of England. In the process, Mary was declared illegitimate, stripped of her title, and separated from her mother. She went from being a princess to being treated like a political problem. For years, she lived in isolation, surrounded by people she could not trust, watching her family fall apart and her position in life disappear. She also faced religious persecution, forced to deny her Catholic faith in a court that now rejected it. These experiences shaped her deeply. She grew up not in comfort, but in fear, humiliation, and instability. As she entered adulthood, Mary's life became even more complicated. England was now a country divided by religion. The old Catholic traditions still existed among many of the people, but the monarchy had officially moved toward Protestantism. Her younger brother, Edward VI, ruled briefly and strongly supported Protestant reforms. Mary, however, remained firmly Catholic. This made her a political threat. If she ever took the throne, many believed she would reverse the religious changes and punish those who supported the new faith. For years she lived under suspicion, constantly watched, her loyalty questioned. At times, her life was in real danger. Political plots formed around her name, and powerful figures considered removing her permanently. She survived not because she was safe, but because she was patient. In 1553, after years of political struggle and shifting power, Mary finally became Queen of England. But by this time, she was no longer the hopeful princess she once was. She was a woman hardened by betrayal, determined to restore the Catholic faith she believed had been stolen from her and the country. Her mission was clear: return England to Catholicism, no matter the cost. What followed became one of the darkest periods in English history. Over the course of her reign, more than 300 Protestants were executed, many of them burned alive at the stake. These were not private punishments. They were public spectacles meant to send a message. Crowds gathered as fires were lit. Victims prayed while flames rose around them. Witnesses described the smell of burning flesh and the sound of screaming carried through the air. The executions were meant to restore religious unity, but instead they created fear and hatred. It was during this time that the people of England began calling their queen by a new name, Bloody Mary, not as a myth or a ghost, but as a reputation she had earned through her actions. Yet one of the most disturbing parts of Mary's life had nothing to do with executions or religion. It was her desperate desire to have a child. As queen, her legacy depended on producing an heir. Without one, her rule would be uncertain, and her life's work could vanish after her death. In 1554, Mary married Philip of Spain, a powerful Catholic prince. The marriage was political, designed to strengthen Catholic influence in England. But it was not popular among the English people, who feared foreign control. Still, Mary hoped the marriage would give her the one thing she wanted most: a child. Soon after the wedding, she announced that she was pregnant. The news spread quickly across the country. Bells rang. Celebrations were planned. The royal court prepared for the birth of a prince who would secure the Catholic future of England. Mary's body seemed to confirm the news. Her stomach grew. She experienced symptoms that looked like pregnancy. Rooms were decorated, and preparations for the baby's arrival were made. But the child never came. Months passed. The expected due date arrived and went. The court grew silent. Doctors and advisors became uneasy. Eventually, the truth could no longer be hidden. There was no baby. The pregnancy had been false. Some historians believe it was a phantom pregnancy, a psychological and hormonal condition where the body produces real symptoms without an actual child. For a queen whose identity and power depended on motherhood, this would have been devastating. Years later, it happened again. Mary believed she was pregnant a second time. Once again, hope filled the court. Once again, preparations were made. And once again, the child never appeared. The emotional toll was enormous. Public embarrassment, private grief, and the crushing realization that she might never secure her legacy began to weigh heavily on her mind. Over time, this part of her life merged with the darker parts of her reputation, helping to shape the image of a tragic, haunted woman, one who searched endlessly for a child that never existed. Mary died in 1558, after only 5 years on the throne. But her story did not end with her death. Her reputation lived on, carried through generations as a warning, a legend, and eventually, a ghost story. Over time, her identity began to blend with older folklore. Stories of witches, spirits, and women tied to mirrors had existed long before her reign. Slowly, these tales merged with the memory of the queen. Her name detached from history and attached itself to something far older and more mysterious. Bloody Mary was no longer just a queen. She became a ritual. Across different cultures and countries, similar mirror rituals began to appear. In some places, the figure was called Bloody Mary. In others, she was known as Mary Worth or Mary White. The method was always similar: a dark room, a mirror, and the repetition of her name. In parts of the United States during the 19th century, young girls performed mirror rituals on certain nights of the year, especially Halloween. They believed that if they stood in front of a mirror holding a candle and walked backward up a staircase, they would see the face of the man they were destined to marry. But if fate was cruel, they would instead see a skull, an omen of death before marriage. Over time, the romantic version of the ritual faded, replaced by something darker. The figure in the mirror was no longer a future husband. It was a ghost, and she was not kind. Those who claimed to see her described different appearances. Some spoke of a disfigured woman. Others described a face covered in blood, empty eyes staring back from the glass. Some said she appeared holding a child. Many claimed their reflections changed, their faces warping into something unfamiliar. Others said they saw shapes behind them that were not physically present in the room. Perhaps most unsettling were the accounts of people who felt watched long after the ritual ended. The fear, they said, did not come during the ritual itself. It came afterward, when they were no longer looking at the mirror. Some historians believe the legend was influenced by other figures. One of them was Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian noblewoman accused of torturing and killing young women. Stories about her were filled with images of blood and cruelty, creating the archetype of a violent female figure surrounded by horror. Another possible influence was Mary Worth, a folklore character often described as a witch or an outcast woman who met a tragic end. Some versions say she was falsely accused of witchcraft and executed. Others claim she practiced dark rituals in front of mirrors. Over centuries, these figures blurred together. Different names, different stories, but the same image remained. A woman connected to blood, fear, and reflections. Mirrors themselves have always carried a strange reputation. For much of human history, they were believed to be more than simple objects. Many cultures treated them as portals between worlds. In ancient Rome, it was believed that a person's reflection held a part of their soul. Breaking a mirror was thought to damage that soul, leading to years of bad luck. In parts of Europe, mirrors were covered after a death. The belief was that if a mirror remained uncovered, the spirit of the deceased might become trapped inside it. In some traditions, people avoided looking into mirrors at night, fearing they might see something other than themselves. There is also a psychological explanation for why mirror rituals feel so disturbing. Mirrors show us, but not exactly as we are. They reverse our image, creating a version of us that looks familiar yet slightly wrong. When a person stares into a mirror for a long time, especially in low light, the brain begins to distort the reflection. Features seem to shift, faces appear to change, eyes look darker, expressions seem unfamiliar. Scientists call this effect Troxler fading, a natural psychological response to prolonged staring. The brain begins to ignore unchanging visual information, causing parts of the image to fade or distort. In the right conditions, dim light, silence, and expectation, this effect can make a person believe they are seeing something supernatural. But the more unsettling interpretation is that the distortion isn't something the brain creates. It might be something the brain reveals. Human imagination is powerful, especially in the dark. When fear is present, the mind fills in the gaps. A shadow becomes a figure. A sound becomes footsteps. A distorted reflection becomes a face that does not belong to us. Mirror rituals work because they combine isolation, darkness, repetition, and suggestion, the perfect ingredients for fear. Even today, people continue the ritual. In homes, at sleepovers, or sometimes alone out of curiosity, most report nothing at all. But some claim strange experiences, reflections that seem to move independently, shadows that appear where none should be, or the persistent feeling of being watched after the ritual ends. Many say the most frightening part isn't the moment they say her name. It's the silence afterward, when they walk away from the mirror but still feel as if someone is watching them from behind the glass. Psychologists suggest that once a person plants the idea of a presence in their mind, it becomes difficult to shake. Every creak of the house, every shifting shadow, every reflection in a window starts to feel suspicious. The fear doesn't come from a ghost, it comes from the expectation of one. Stories like this survive because people continue to tell them. Every retelling, every whisper of her name keeps the legend alive, and with time, the story evolves, details change. New experiences are added, old fears take new shapes, but the mirror always remains at the center. Bloody Mary may have started as a real queen, a tragic and controversial figure from history. But the version people claim to see today feels like something else entirely, something shaped by centuries of fear, memory, folklore, and imagination. And perhaps that is why the legend refuses to disappear. Because the mirror does not belong to history, it belongs to the present. Every home has one. Every person eventually stands in front of one, alone, in the quiet. Imagine standing in a dark bathroom. The door is closed, the lights are off, your reflection is barely visible in the mirror. For a moment, you watch yourself. The longer you stare, the less familiar your own face begins to feel. The shadows shift, the room grows silent. The mirror doesn't create Bloody Mary. It only shows what's already there. And the next time you find yourself alone, standing in front of a mirror in the dark, you may begin to wonder if you're really looking at yourself. or if something is looking back. If there's another story you want uncovered, leave it in the comments. Some of the darkest ones begin exactly that way. And subscribe to The Silent Scream and turn on notifications, because some legends don't stay in the past. They wait, sometimes in places as simple as a name or a mirror, and the next time you see your reflection, just make sure it's still yours.